Well, hello everyone. Welcome to the second term of the weekly homework composition challenges, the WHC. We'll be discussing over the next 5 to 7 weeks the concept of modes. Modes are, simply put, scales, and they're scales that we can build by sort of arbitrarily taking the major scale that we're familiar with, which we now will learn is called the Ionian mode, and changing the tonic root so that in each one of these modes, as we progress, we're just changing the tonal center from C to D to E to F, etc. And over the next few weeks, we'll delve into each one of these specifically. To start with, let's just listen to the major scale that we're all familiar with. And now listen to, I'm going to jump ahead to the Mixolydian, the same exact notes now, but we've rearranged them so that we're basing our tonic center on G instead of C. Again, it's the same notes as the C major scale, but now listen to. It has a very distinct characteristic all its own because we're listening to that relationship from the idea of G being our tonal center. So the tonic root is now G. We've got that 4 and 5. And I just picked that example because if we jumped, if we went just straight from and then listened to D Dorian, it doesn't necessarily sound as distinct just listening to them next to each other. So I decided that I wanted to hear that relationship by jumping ahead a few. But we've got, if you look through these 7 notes here, what we've done is we're moving through. Dorian is beginning those same exact notes on the D, and the minors, the majors, the diminished, that also shifts as we move these tonal centers. So now you'll see in the Ionian, D minor and E minor are the second and third degree of that scale. Well, now they're first, so those two remain minor. And now the third degree is major, fourth degree is major, but now the fifth degree moves down to minor, and that diminished chord moves from the 7th position where it was in the Ionian mode over to the 6th. And now we've got a major 7 that represents this move from the 1 being major over here. And if we keep moving through, you'll see we begin the Phrygian on the E minor, the Lydian on F major, Mixolydian we just listened to is on G major. And down here we've got the Aeolian mode. That's the one we all know is the minor. These are the exact same notes as the C major scale. It's the same, the same relationship. You look, the D minor and E minor, they're up here as minors. That B diminished is in the 2nd position, but it's still a diminished chord for B. It's the same notes, we are rearranged and we change our tonal center. So the same notes as C major in A minor sound like. That sounds minor to me. Finally, it's a placeholder unless you want to do experimental avant-garde music, but there's the Locrian mode. And we've been following the travels of this B diminished as it moves through the different scale degrees. And what happens when it's at your root, if you listen to it, it doesn't resolve, and it feels unresolved, and it's very off-putting. So I don't think we'll be spending a lot of time on Locrian over the next few weeks, but I did want to mention it just so you wondered what happened when it begins. You open up with a diminished chord. It doesn't sound good to me. Things have been composed in it, but usually just hey, look at me, I can do this. So now for this week, let's just delve into the 2 modes that we're most familiar with, the Ionian, the major scale, and the Aeolian, the minor scale. And one thing worth noting about the major scale, if you remember from when we talked about secondary dominants and when we talked about 7th chords, is in this dominant position where the 5, where the G is, that's where you can use that dominant chord, that G, B, D, F. So that dominant chord there, that's part of the flavoring of what makes the major scale, is that the dominant 7th chord lives in that 5th position. When we look down at the minor, the natural minor, the Aeolian, you'll see that, well, it's living over in the seventh position. That's if when we were moving through and we talked about the relative minor of C being A minor, you'll see, oh, that's where that G went. And so that's also where the dominant seventh follows. So to understand how these are constructed, it's worth keeping track of the intervals between the notes in the scale degree. So for a major scale, it's tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone. And if we look down at the Aeolian, it's tone, semitone, tone, semitone, tone. So blindly, you should be able to, at least if you can memorize those patterns, the whole, half, whole, half, and down here we have whole, half, half, whole. Those are the intervals between notes in those two different scale degrees. Other ways, and I wanted to demonstrate, if we take C, and now we say, well, what's C minor? What do we change from a C major to get down to the C minor? And you'll see that in natural minor, you flat the third, as we remember from making minor scales. You also flat the sixth and flat the seventh. So if we take C, and aside from changing where the scale degrees are in terms of diminished major or minor, you'll see that, okay, well, it's C, D, E, F, G, A, and B, but notice that the third is E flat, the sixth is A flat, and the seventh is B flat. And that also happens to be, as we talked about before, where that dominant seventh resides. So that's another little flavoring of the minor mode. I should point out that where the minor seventh and the major minor seventh also add flavoring, but I'm trying not to confuse everyone. So what I'd like us to try and do for this week's challenge is to take a song, and we should all have a pretty good arsenal of chord progressions to work off of, and start the verse in major, and then in the chorus, do a key change to the relative minor. So if you wrote a song in C, the relative minor is A minor, and whatever scale you use, look at what's in that submediant in that sixth position, and make the chorus begin with that as its tonal center. And in fact, you can use the same pattern. You could write a 1, 4, 5 in major, and then in the verse go from 1, 4, 5 from the perspective of the minor. And so that's what we'll do for this week, and I look forward to hearing what everybody has to write. Good luck.